You're watching Hindustan Times, and I'm Aditi Prasad. Earlier this week, the Modi government banned, dozens of Chinese apps which have been, from in India, stating privacy concerns. A day later, the immensely popular TikTok app, the short video app TikTok, was taken down from Google Play and from Google Play Store and from Apple Store. Other 58 Chinese apps have now also been removed from the various Play stores as well as the app stores, including the ShareIt, UC Browser, Mu Community, amongst a host of others. I am joined today by Blaise Fernandez, director of Gateway House, on the implications of this, ban, this mass ban that India has done, and whether or not it will hit China where it affects most. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right. So let me start off, on the face of it, a lot of people have sort of been asking me, on the face of it, it appears that many of these Chinese apps may not be very badly hit as far as revenues are concerned. For those, because of the whatever is going on at the border, there's a lot of anti-China sentiment. So people say, okay, fine. So Modi government has banned these apps, good for him and good for India. And they may not be really hit that badly revenue-wise. But won't their valuations and global standing be badly affected?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Uh, I think People's Daily, one of the Chinese websites, the official, the official arm of the government, actually mentioned a value. They put it as US dollars 6 billion will be the hit that TikTok will be taking. Now, if you have to take Chinese data upfront, let's stick with $6 billion. But I think the world knows Chinese data is never ever accurate. Look at it from this point of view. We have a market of 450 million smartphone users, going up to 850 million smartphone users by the year 2025. No digital service activity can ignore India, be it social commerce, be it e-commerce, be it entertainment. This is such an important market. Shareholders will be asking TikTok to have an IPO coming up, valued at $100 billion plus. What's your game plan for India? Uh, and to kind of do a deep dive in revenues, I'll give you a small example. At the end of the day, we are going to be a $5 trillion economy in a matter of time. Whether it's 2025 or it's 2026. Facebook has, in my estimate, something like 11,000 advertisers.
Right.
Just 100 of those advertisers contribute to somewhere between 20 to 25% of their revenues. The rest of them are small and medium enterprises who advertise on Facebook. Okay. India is a small and medium enterprise market. At the end of the day, you cannot afford a market which has a double-digit ad growth for the digital medium. So if you look at it from the short run, yes, there are no revenue implications, maybe slight pinpricks, but in the long run, if you're not present in India, it's going to kind of impact valuations. And I end with this quote on this subject, and I keep mentioning this in all my writing as well as my communication on behalf of Gateway House. The only COVID-resistant story in the Southern Hemisphere is the India digital story. And I think one company has proved in the midst of this pandemic, they've raised a few billions of dollars across the world.
Right. So you're basically saying that the India digital story is intact despite the COVID, impact, and therefore China will really suffer in the long term, especially in terms of valuations, in terms of global standings, as far as the ban of these Chinese apps are concerned. But there's also another question that people have been asking me,
Can I
especially
just
my
interrupt you
family.
for a minute? Can
Yes,
I
sure.
interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, so don't look at China in terms of apps, okay? Look at China in terms of BAT, B-A-T, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent.
Right.
Okay, and then you have a number of other, I would say small, but unicorns built around that system. The combined valuation of the BAT trilogy is $100 billion in the world. Okay, India is part of the Chinese digital Silk Road, whatever you want to call it. Don't look at apps banning in isolation. Don't look at it from revenue. Don't look at it from valuations. Look at it as part of a larger picture, the Chinese digital Silk Road. India is not on the BRI, which is the Brick and Road Initiative from China. India is very much part of the Chinese digital Silk Road. By banning these apps now, we've kind of also hit China at the Achilles heel. They are not in BRI, they are not on the digital Silk Road. And finally, all this is connected to the 5G strategy of China, which will come later too. But I'm sorry
Right.
I interrupted you. Let me kind of
No,
get to
no,
your.
please. That's a very valid point because and how much investments does this BAT have in India? You talked about the global investments, but as far as Indian investments are concerned,
I think back from what Gateway House has tracked is about $5 billion in the digital ecosystem. Okay,
so
but
far.
so far, but there could be that number could be larger. That number is that money is in India. It's not going anywhere else because you've given it to us. You can't take it back at best. Probably could stay. But I think the narrative of late is where is this money going to come? What's going to happen? Who's going to come to the party? I think don't look too far. I think a number of Indian companies today are well capitalized. The government should be coming to the party with the Navratnas. At the end of the day, China was backed by SOEs. I think the government should take this opportunity and come to the party because a number of our Navratnas are kind of well capitalized. One important point, and I'd like to bring to your notice, is Europe missed the boom. Europe was not part of the FANG gang. Europe missed the entire digital economy. You don't have a Facebook or an Apple or an Amazon or a Netflix or a Google emerging from Europe. The only thing they have is SAP. There are a number of
Right.
European private equity funds. There are a number of European family funds that run touching close to billions, and a number of European sovereign funds. I think India should be looking at Europe because Europe is now settling down post Brexit. They'll be looking at opportunities for growth. Their growth is more or less flat. And I think the India EU bilateral should be kind of re energized because it's time to kind of probably get European money into our unicorns. So the whole scenario that there's going to be no money left, what's going to happen, I think we need not worry. The India digital story is strong. Everybody needs to be invested in India, and we'll get that money even if China doesn't back us anymore.
So now let me move on to another aspect that I want to discuss with you. And a lot of people have really asked me about how, of course, we all know data is touted as the new oil. How dangerous were these data flows from India to China, which of course now, because at least these 59 apps have been banned, there are more. But why is this data flow from India to China dangerous?
Data flow from India to any country is dangerous because that is data from your market. So I think one of the things that the government again needs to kind of revisit is the data protection bill and the privacy laws and everything. So we need to kind of get that state. Data from our country to any market is dangerous, so that's a given. With China, it's especially dangerous given the relationships and the hostilities between the two countries. This data can be used to blackmail you. This data can be misused in terms of profiling you. This data can be misused in very many ways. There are many government people using these apps. There are many army officers using these apps. These apps can be used in very many ways which are mischievous in nature, and that's what makes the data lying in China dangerous. And I think one of the things that India has to do is should any app, especially from a country where there is a hostile environment or a history of hostilities, they have to ring fence themselves, have the data being stored in India, also have content curation centers across the country. So if you kind of using, if you try, if you're trying to misuse or create propaganda or kind of incite communal disharmony, okay, it's no point monitoring it from Delhi. Monitor it from Tamil Nadu, where the original source is in Tamil, the language, and have a direct connection with the cyber unit of Tamil Nadu police. So the matter can be doused in a matter of minutes. Remember one thing: in the digital world, for something to go viral, you know, it's a matter of seconds. And
Right.
the Indian government will be well advised to ensure that if any of these apps which have a potential to kind of foment sectarian violence or civil unrest in this country, they need to have data curation centers. America has insisted for TikTok to have a data curation center. They're opening one so they can monitor the data within America and also pull down data which is anti-Indian.
You know, there's also this fear that these Chinese apps, they were asking for way more personal data from the users compared to their global counterparts. Would you agree with that assessment? And how does that sort of tie into the whole risk that the users were taking in terms of sharing their personal data with these apps, and eventually, obviously, all of it going back to Beijing? And there's also the fear that because of the regulations in China and because of the the Chinese companies reporting to the government in Beijing, they would happily share everything without any regulations or restrictions in that being in place.
Okay, so kind of, I would disagree that Chinese app asked more data or asked more personal questions in terms of, launching it on your iPhone or your iPad. In fact, Chinese apps probably are the easiest to use, and they're very user friendly, and they're very light on usage in terms of data. Therefore, you got those numbers, especially for UC browser vis-a-vis Google, Chrome. They're very easy to use. But once an app is downloaded on your phone, you've opened the floodgates to your personal data. One really doesn't know what functions are there in those apps to track your bank balance, to track your personal conversations. So it's like you've opened the Pandora's box for the app. So that makes that makes it dangerous because all this data that's being mined is sitting in a country where you do not have access to it. As I said, data sitting outside India is dangerous for anybody. So if the data could be sitting in an American company or an American server, that's equally dangerous. But when you have hostilities, it makes it even more vulnerable.
It's not just China, it's about any country and the data going out. How secure is the Indian data privacy environment as on date? You listed out many things that the government ought to do to sort of create a more a better environment for data to reside within India itself and not go out of the country. But as of now, without those measures being in place, how secure is the data here? Presently, at what stage are we in?
If your ATM with your password is not with you, it's with a stranger, it's as secure as that.
So right now we're really insecure
Yeah,
as
sure, you're
far as
vulnerable.
that
You're
is as
vulnerable.
a
You're
country.
vulnerable. It's like your ATM with your PIN number is with somebody who you don't trust, who is alien to you.
What you're basically saying is that as of now, there are really with the present regulatory environment that we have as far as data in India is concerned, it is really unsafe, whether to China or to any other country, to a Chinese app or to any or an app of the United States or an app from any other country.
Absolutely, because you know what, it can be residing in a very friendly country, but a cyber attack, and there are certain nation states known for cyber attacks. You can mine data through a cyber attack.
Let me just come back to the ban on Chinese apps and where we are at. Uh, with these ban on these Chinese apps is obviously it seems like a first step. What should be the next step of the government as far as preserving? data, preserving the soft power really of Chinese apps and its investments in India from really getting a free run in this country. And I'm talking specifically about China right now.
Okay, so let's classify the Chinese investments, or for that matter, investments in the digital ecosystem in the app world into four categories. The first category is what we called the economic activity category. Economic activity apps, where you hire a vehicle or you order for something or you order for a service. And the app acts as the intermediary. I think the government of India has done well by not banning economic activity apps from China, okay, because that would have impacted livelihoods of people in a large number. That would have impacted economic activities, inconvenience to the consumers. So, but that doesn't mean they give them a free run. They've got to ring fence the data around these apps, make sure that's lying in India, and make sure that there's content curation centers lying in India to address any issues that can cause national security problems. Okay, so that's the first category of app. There's also the service-oriented apps where you share files or you probably use it for conferencing, etc., etc. So there are alternatives. So if you don't have a particular app to chat, there are 10,000 chat apps available. So I think the government is cognizant of the fact that they've kind of used that in their criterion to ban apps. The third is the vanity apps. Vanity apps is what I would call in local language time pass apps.
Right,
Life moved on without TikTok, life will move on without TikTok. Okay,
right.
the generation who grew up with Yahoo went, something else came, so life will move on. I think they've targeted the vanity apps, and a lot of in that list of 59, a lot of those apps there do not add value to your life. They may probably impact employment, but it's kind of minimal in terms of the economic impact. And the last is the security apps, or what we call the national threat. Like UC browser is a clear example of what we call a strategic app, which has security implications in India. That's also banned. So I think overall the government has taken a calibrated decision and made sure that the economic activity apps continue to run in India without any disruptions, but I'm sure there'll be ring fencing around them to protect us and protect our data and make sure those apps are not misused. And the
Right.
vanity apps have been banned.
Right. So let's hope that ring fencing comes into place soon enough. The next point, and perhaps an important point that I would like to address is that of 5G. Isn't it time that India officially announces that Chinese companies like Huawei are banned from the 5G race?
Okay, let's kind of talk of 5G. And again, let's not look at 5G in isolation. I'll put this to you in a very simple form. Think of a four-tier cake. The bottom tier of the cake is the Brick and Road initiative of China. The second tier of the cake is the digital silk route or the digital silk road of China, which is basically the bad companies. The third tier of the cake is China 2025, where they want to be world class manufacturers. And the fifth tier, or the fourth tier of the cake is uh, China Standards 2035, where China wants to set global standards. So, for example, I'll give you an example of standards. Today, your phone can come from Venezuela, it can be made in Nicaragua, it could be made in Bangladesh. But the Wi Fi standards are the same for all over the world. So, whether your phone is made, the globe as all the nations have sat together and says these are the Wi-Fi standards that we will follow. So whichever make is your phone, whichever country it originates from, Wi-Fi will work. So that's an example of setting global standards. China by 2035 wants to set global standards. What's 5G? 5G
Right.
is nothing but the cake stand. So these five tiers of the cake are being strung on the cake stands, which is basically 5G. And every time a nation decides to boycott 5G from China, that cake stand gets wobbly. And if the cake stand gets wobbly, and it cannot hold the weight of the tiers,
Right.
it can be literally cake on the floor. And cake on the floor is not good for China's China's economy. So that's the lever that India has.
So that's the lever that India has, and India should possibly use it because, I was reading an article, a paper written by you in 2019, and where you argued very effectively for how there needs to be accountability in trans-border data flows, and then maybe it's time for the Indian government. I mean, with the banning of these apps is obviously a first step, and successful implementation and enforcement of such policies will possibly make the difference between vulnerability and security in times to come. Thank you so
It's
much.
not
Thank
security, even self-reliance.
Atmanirbhar Bharat, exactly, in times to come. Thank you so much, Mr. Fernandez, for joining us this evening. Thank you so much, viewers, for watching this. We'll keep coming back to you with more updates. Keep watching HindustanTimes.com.